So, you just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and you have no idea what the fuck just happened. Not to worry, we enlightened beings have been cooking on what you just saw happen for the past year, and we've got a few ideas. This video is going to be a synthesis of the most well-supported theories that have cropped up in the fandom over the past year, and of those numerous theories, we're going to specifically focus on what happened with Cloud and Aerith at the end of the game, because they clearly are experiencing something that the rest of the party members are not, and it's most definitely going to come to a head in a couple of years when Part 3 drops. So let's break it down. Obviously, major spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. If you haven't finished the game, do not watch this video. Seriously, you have been warned. The first thing we're going to break down is the altar scene, and specifically the weird things that happen when Aerith gets stabbed. Now, at first it appears that Cloud has parried Sephiroth's attack and saves Aerith, but then things inexplicably snap back to the original canon events and Aerith dies anyway. Now, before we get to that, you notice the weird visual effects that happen when Cloud parries Sephiroth's blade? Green energy seems to coalesce around his sword, and then when he parries the attack, there's a corona of rainbow-colored light. While we're not sure what the green aura around the sword represents exactly, we do know what the rainbow aura represents. And we've seen it before, twice actually. Once when Zack chooses who to help first when he's in the tunnels, and a second time when Aerith gives Cloud her white materia. These rainbows represent a branching of fate, or a moment where a pivotal decision is made at a key moment in time, and this decision in turn leads to new possibilities. Whenever this visual cue appears, it means that a new timeline or world is being created. This is possible because of what the party did in Remake. They defeated the Arbiter of Fate, meaning that the canon timeline of Final Fantasy VII is now untethered to any sort of fate or destiny. It doesn't have to happen again. Basically, the only explanation supported by the narrative is that Cloud did manage to save Aerith in that moment and create a branched timeline where she survives this encounter. But for reasons yet to be explained, something forces the timeline back into place. It could have been Sephiroth, it could have been Aerith herself, we don't know. Either way, we'll have to wait until Part 3 to get answers on what exactly went down with that specifically. Anyway, after Cloud saves Aerith, during the reset we see static on the screen, and she's suddenly mortally wounded by Sephiroth. Many people have speculated that this static represents Cloud actively suppressing or disassociating in real time, and this is a solid interpretation, but hallucinations are not the only context this static effect is used in. It seems to be a general representation of characters perceiving things that are beyond our basic 5 senses, because not only do we see this when Sephiroth is psychically attacking Cloud, we also see it happen when Cloud gets glimpses of the future. Or past if you want to be pedantic, because in case you haven't noticed, the remake games are a sequel. They're not literal remakes. This implies that the static effect is more associated with expanded awareness as opposed to just Cloud's memory issues or Sephiroth's manipulations. Linking this idea of expanded perception back to the scene in question, there is a musical sting that plays when the static effect happens, and that musical cue is the lifestream theme. Now that motif is used very sparingly throughout the game and only in very, very specific contexts. Obviously when you are doing lifestream related stuff. And from what we've been told by the devs in supplementary material and interviews is that all these worlds are located within the lifestream. So using that musical sting when Aerith is suddenly going from being saved to being killed leads me to believe that whatever is happening here has something to do with the parallel worlds that are located within the lifestream. Because you have to ask, why would they only play that musical sting for just a second and then go back to the normal score as the scene continues? Doing that from a writing perspective shows clear intent from the dev team, that what we're seeing on the screen should not be taken at face value. So now I want you to keep that in mind as we move on to the next bit of the scene. So after Aerith is stabbed, her hand comes up and she comforts Cloud, and the screen seems to flicker back and forth between there being blood on the ground and no blood on the ground. Based on what we've said about the static effect and the fact that it's tied to expanded awareness, I'm led to believe that this means that Cloud is simultaneously experiencing both of these worlds or timelines at once. After Aerith is stabbed, the static flashes show Cloud is saying something, but we can't hear it. Now, if you played the original game, you'll probably deduce that this is supposed to be Cloud's monologue about Aerith not being able to smile, laugh, or get angry, etc. That's actually happening. It's not a hallucination. But with what we've talked about before, about how that static represents expanded awareness, that is Cloud experiencing the world in which he failed to save Aerith. However, Cloud is new at being able to do this, so at the moment he's mentally present in the world where he did save her, but he's feeling the emotions from the other world because he's also experiencing them at the same time. Because Cloud branched the worlds at that moment in time, Aerith's survival scenario is being transposed over the original sequence of events where she dies. And to address a popular counterpoint, some sections of the fandom have put forth the idea that Cloud is blocking out the tragedy he's experiencing and simply hallucinating Aerith comforting him. And while that is entirely possible, the rainbow visual cues and the meticulously chosen musical cues lead me to believe that the more likely explanation is he's experiencing both at the same time. Whatever we saw Cloud do before this actually happened, but he's the only one that can perceive Aerith's theoretical survival. Just as Cloud was getting flashes of the future in Remake and Rebirth, now he's getting flashes of the main timeline where he failed to save Aerith. He lacks the experience to be able to parse out what world he's in. And you know, that's just my opinion, tempered with what the community has been talking about for the past year. So now we're going to get on to the next important oddity of this whole sequence of the game. During the final phase of that marathon boss battle, Aerith says the following right before you fight Sephiroth with her.
I saw what you did back there, Cloud. Thank you.
Thank you, man. This ain't over.
Okay, let's finish this.
That was very deliberate that they'd put that line in when they did. Again, it heavily lends credence to the fact that whatever Cloud did actually happened somewhere. To address the counterpoint to this, there's a theory going around that she's just trying to hold Cloud's sanity together long enough for him to complete his quest, but honestly, given Aerith's personality, it's a bit of a stretch that she'd manipulate Cloud to ignore her potential death in such a way that could lead to him crashing even harder than he normally would once the truth is revealed. If she'd actually died on that altar, I think she'd say something more comforting to Cloud in that moment, like she said to him in Advent Children when he asked her to forgive him for failing her.
I never blamed you. Not once. You came for me. That's all that matters.
She would be trying to soften the blow of her death on Cloud, but instead she thanks him for what he did in that moment. And given the context of her tone and what happened leading up to this, it implies that Cloud succeeded in some fashion. And don't take my word for it, take Sephiroth's. He says so himself that he underestimated Aerith. And then on top of that, what we've been shown and what is implied lines up with what Sephiroth tells Cloud during that kind of lore dump scene after Cloud's date with Aerith in the parallel world.
When the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding. Some quickly perish, while others endure. Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade.
Remember that when these branches are created, they don't just go anywhere, they persist for some indeterminate amount of time until they finally fade back into the lifestream. You can't just delete them unless, of course, you are able to merge the worlds in a convergence, as Sephiroth intends to. However, according to the devs, Sephiroth's attempt to converge the worlds failed in this scenario. That's why he says he underestimated Aerith. This is the first time we see that smug grin knocked off of Sephiroth's face. Whatever Cloud and Aerith did, it threw a wrench in Sephiroth's plans, and he is, for the first time, visually pissed off. So this is why he has to instigate that war with Wutai, because this is his backup plan. His initial idea was to converge the worlds at the ancient capital where Aerith dies, but he fails. So now we get to the last odd bit, which is after the big fight. When the party is sitting at the edge of the water mourning Aerith, Cloud sits there seemingly unfazed, and then he gets another static interference moment, and he gets flashes of Aerith's death. you know, the bad scenario. And then of course, after that static effect happens, he can see her. There's a lot of debate as to what exactly she is at this moment, but the two most well-supported theories are that she's simply a ghost, or that this is the Aerith that Cloud saved on the altar. Now, there was a third interpretation, and it was that this version of Aerith is a manipulation of Jenova/Sephiroth, appearing to Cloud as Aerith to further isolate him from his party members. The problem with this counterpoint is that the musical cue that plays when Cloud is able to see Aerith is again the lifestream motif. Listen.
I'll see you off.
Now, if that's just a hallucination, then why does the livestream theme play when Cloud sees Aerith next to him? Again, that puts more weight on either Aerith being a ghost from the livestream or this being the Aerith that he saved. We're not sure yet. However, the odds of this being a hallucination from Sephiroth and Jenova, it's highly unlikely because there's too many things contradicting it to give it any serious consideration beyond it being just a fan theory. Because on top of that, in the ending cutscene, when Aerith touches Nanaki, he senses her touch. So that means that whatever Cloud is seeing is not just in his head. And from what we've been shown, in order for Sephiroth and Jenova to manipulate people who don't have their cells within them, they need one of the hooded figures present to shapeshift that hooded figure into whoever they want to impersonate. Jenova and Sephiroth do not have a vessel present that can manipulate more than just Cloud. Like, they can only attack Cloud psychically, not Red. Now with that out of the way, I want to go back to the musical cue that plays when Cloud can suddenly see Aerith again. That happens earlier in the game under the same context, but in a different situation. So when the party's hanging out at the gold saucer, Cloud takes a nap and he falls asleep and dips into his other body for a second and sees Aerith, and they play that same livestream motif right as it happens. The musical cue plays, Cloud can suddenly see Aerith even though she's not physically in the same place as he is. Exact same context. Catch my drift? And on a side note, that weird scene in the gold saucer is not addressed at any point afterward for the rest of the game. That is most definitely coming back for part 3. And Cloud is definitely getting a section in the next game where he wakes up in his other body. Anyway, back to the waterside weirdness. So after this alleged water burial, this vision of Aerith is either her ghost or the one that he saved. However, given what we've intuited from the events on the altar and how they are framed, I'm led to believe that it's most likely the Aerith that Cloud saved and not just her ghost. After all, if this is just a ghost, why frame the altar scene with Cloud saving Aerith immediately after having Cloud experiencing interdimensional travel and then having a scene with Sephiroth where he teaches Cloud about the nuances of what he just experienced? The game intentionally builds up Cloud's ability to perceive and exist between worlds right before Aerith dies, making it unlikely that the game will simply just follow the original story's path without addressing this like crazy new dimension to the plot. Writing wise, it'd be a massive waste of time to put all of this information in the chapter before Aerith dies if they're just going to play it straight in part 3 and leave her dead. That's not a red herring, that's what I like to call subverting expectations, and 9 times out of 10, doing this in a story can cause its emotional beats to fail to land, and it also ignores one of the core principles of writing called Chekhov's gun. This technique states that if you draw attention to a gun on the wall in a scene, that gun has to be fired at some point before the story ends. Otherwise, you've not only wasted your audience's time, but you've also wasted your own time as well. Why'd you write that if you weren't going to use it? Why would they load the barrel with all of this information just before Aerith allegedly dies? They want you to be able to intuit the wider meta-narrative that is in the background of the story, which is the livestream conflict between Aerith and Sephiroth. Now then, with all that in the bag, we're going to get into the final section of the video, which is based on some concepts that the devs of the Remake project have referenced in interviews and supplementary content. So right now we're going to talk about the Yogacara school of thought. So it is a school of Mahayana Buddhism, and it states basically that our perception of reality is just a filter. It doesn't actually exist in a tangible way like a physical object does. What truly exists is our consciousness of the sequence of events that make up our lives. I think, therefore I am. Each person experiences reality through their own consciousness, and together, these individual perceptions create what we call life, world events, and then shared experiences, etc. Now, this concept ties into the concept of the collective unconsciousness, specifically from Carl Jung's perspective. Jung's theory of the collective unconscious highlights how certain archetypes, like universal symbols and themes, appear across mythologies and cultures all over the world, even though these cultures probably had little to no contact with each other. As an example, almost all mythologies from around the world have recurring themes of duality, like sun and moon, mother and father, light and dark. These exist in mythologies and traditions all over the world. These two concepts, according to the devs of the Remake project, were integral in their framing of the Remake project's narrative. In viewing the story through the lens of these ideas, I'd like to point you to the following scene.
Now, would anyone else like to share their story with the group?
So, my parents are no longer with us. Here, that is. But I believe they're still out there, on another plane. I've been reading a bunch of theories about this alternate world in the hope of going there someday. And over the course of my studies, I stumbled across a fascinating theory. It addressed the issue of what the lifestream is, arguing that spiritual energy is actually a manifestation of our knowledge and memories. Like I said, it's a fascinating theory, but it's incomplete. What about our hopes and dreams? We remember those, don't we? So what if spiritual energy doesn't distinguish between our real, lived memories and the unrealized desires buried deep in our hearts? What if coming into contact with that energy allowed us to peer through the looking glass, so to speak? It's just an idea, but I hope to find the truth someday.
Well, isn't that splendid?
Blessings of the planet be...
And by the way, this scene is extremely missable. It happens in Cosmo Canyon if you stand around the circle where everybody's talking for long enough. So in the context of Final Fantasy VII's lifestream, what's the difference between a dream and a memory? You remember your dreams, don't you? And when I say dreams, I mean in the more abstract sense, like deeply held desires or ambitions. If you were to have a machine examine all of the memories in your head over your entire life so far and then put them on a computer screen, how would you know which ones were the dreams and which ones were the actual memories you have? What would you have to do? You would have to sit there and point out to the computer which ones were which. Or in this case, the computer is the lifestream. And the lifestream doesn't care which is which. They're all the same as far as the lifestream is concerned. When the Arbiter of Fate was defeated at the end of Remake, there's no longer any sort of discriminating force that parses out which are the collective dreams and which are the collective memories. In this case, the filter itself was the Whispers, who kept those desires and hopes from deviating away from what the fated canon is inside the lifestream. Now with Fate broken, we have an endlessly branching series of objective alternative realities within the lifestream. There's no more filter anymore. And this is supported by what Aerith says to Cloud before they go on their date in the parallel world.
Are we?
We could call it a homecoming. Or homeward bound, maybe? Let's just call it a dream. My dream, to be precise.
Aerith calls her date with Cloud her dream, and Cloud is able to bring physical matter from Aerith's pocket dimension back to the main world, the white materia. With Fate broken, Aerith's pocket dimension is a real place. Aerith wanted a chance to be with Cloud so much to the point that it physically manifested within the lifestream, just as one of her actual memories would. So with that in mind, on the altar scene, perhaps Cloud wanted to save Aerith so badly that it physically manifested and became one of the potential branches within the lifestream. And to tie this back to Jung and Yogacara, perhaps the reason that Cloud is the only one who can see this is because he was the only party member present when that altar scene happened. Remember that in the endgame scenario, just like in Remake, they had to cross the singularity, but this time around Cloud was the only one who did it. So the party's collective memory is very different from Cloud's memory of the event. And of course, I think that is going to be a key point of conflict in part 3. You know, Cloud's gonna say, no, Aerith's alive, I saved her, and the party members are gonna say otherwise. And we'll see how that turns out. While we don't know the inner mechanics of what happened, the things that I've discussed in this video so far are very much a hint as to what they possibly could be. And, you know, most of the community is kind of chipping away at these ideas to try and flesh them out to basically predict part 3. Now, I've said a lot during this video, so I'm gonna kind of boil everything down into one monologue, alright? So here you go. TLDR. We have no idea what just happened.
You serious?
But from what we've been told and shown so far, Cloud saved Aerith, but it was seemingly undone by Sephiroth. However, when Cloud parried Masamune, his desire to save Aerith was so strong that it physically manifested itself within the lifestream. Not only that, but according to Sephiroth, once created, these worlds take some indeterminate amount of time to fade back into the lifestream. That means that while the events at the altar were altered, Aerith is still out there somewhere. However, since Cloud is the only one with a full awareness of the other worlds, it's up to him as to whether or not he can truly save Aerith this time and take her out of what is essentially limbo, a space between life and death. Aerith is dead, but not for Cloud, and I think that is what the narrative cues and writing techniques are pointing to for the finale of this trilogy. But that's just my opinion. There's a lot that remains to be seen, but I think that the devs have given us enough information to chew on in the interim while we break apart the ending of Rebirth. In the meantime, if this is your first encounter with my channel, I have another Final Fantasy VII video that may catch your interest. I'm a writer and artist by trade, so you can expect more art and analysis from me in the future, but I of course love to dip my toe into the FF7 pool of content every once in a while. So if you enjoyed my video, leave a like and consider subscribing. I'd like to grow this channel to do something really cool with it later down the line. Anyway, that's all I got for you for now, so I'll see you all next time, whenever that is.